But yeah, speaking of communism, I need to talk about this one thing. People, it seems to me like people don't fully understand, like they didn't really get the point of a lot of my early content. And I'm going to be talking a lot, probably, about my earlier content in like future podcast episodes. But what I mean by like my early content was like back in the Tessa Lagrange era when I was playing that character, and all of my videos were basically like character based, you know? It's kind of interesting. I want to talk more about her in like a future podcast episode, like more down the line, not really like this early in the like genealogy of the show or whatever, but um more less about the form, more about the content of those old videos that I don't think people really grasped the point of and what I was actually like trying to um convey. They Cuz it was very like I would just turn the camera on and film it with like a rough idea of what I was trying to talk about, and then just make it as funny and campy a little bit and kind of like goofballish as I possibly could. But as long as I got the idea out, you know what I mean? And that worked well for that type of form of video. But one thing that I realized when I read the Communist Manifesto for the first time, which was like 2019, 2 years ago, 2 years ago almost. I think I read that like in the spring. But I realized the fact that, or learned or whatever, the fact that there is a dialectic. We're getting into dialectics here. The master-slave dialectic between like masters and slaves. Richard Wolff talks about this kind of. He makes this point. And then after that era, you have lords and serfs who are in the same master-slave dialectic. The lord is the master. The serf is the slave. Under feudalism. And then after feudalism, when you have the advent of capitalism, the master-slave dialectic reforms into employer and employee, where the employer is the master and the employee is the slave. And this is why it's called wage slavery. Because it's the same dialectic. It's the same fundamental relationship of... This is also proletariat and bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is the master, proletariat is the slave. It's owner class and working class. Who owns the means of production and who works on the means of production. Classes in society is also the master-slave dialectic. And so what a lot of people don't understand about my perspective and criticism of capitalism is that the employer-employee relationship is one of the key parts of capitalism that I just absolutely despise, because it is just, there is nothing special about it. It is not like, oh, we found the system that corresponds correctly with human nature or whatever. No, it's literally a societal choice. It's a choice on the societal level. There are other ways of doing things. Human beings did things other ways before we did things in this way. And we will hopefully one day break out of this way of doing things and do things differently than we are doing them now. But That's sort of like historical materialism type thing. But there's nothing special about the employer-employee relationship. It's literally just another derivative of the master-slave dialectic. That's my perspective, and people don't seem to like grasp that concept. And then what I think, and this is more kind of, that is just like Marxism. But this, what I'm about to say right now, is more kind of like what I think, like what I believe, more sort of like my own ideas. More Madelinism coming down the pike right now. What I think the master-slave dialectic does to a society is basically, and like what that contradiction of human treatment does, where it's like you have one group of people that is like painted as the good ones, and we ideologically do this in our society today. We do, where it's like, because we justify things, we act as though, and we are trained to think that capitalism is an actual meritocracy, and the people who are on the top of it deserve to be there, and the people who are on the bottom of it deserve to be there. It's this axiomatic justification of the status quo, where it's like, oh, everything is just your own individual decision making. The people who are poor and homeless, they just made bad personal financial decisions. But it's like, you don't understand that under capitalism, with the quote unquote free market, is we're slaves to the market as well, and the market's mechanisms and machinations of the market, which are not democratically controlled. It's literally just this wild, vicious social machine that will throw you and throw your life wherever it will. And I think one good consequence of the coronavirus crisis is the fact that it's making people who never would have seen this before see the fact that all of our problems as a species and as a society exist on the societal, cultural, collective level, in the level of material conditions, not the level of your individual life. Your individual life doesn't really, your individual life is basically more or less inhibited and controlled, and you're put into a condition of seriality by these institutions and these crises that happen, and these crises that happen because of these institutions and the contradictions within them, and so on and so on. But we ideologically are trained by the system, and by virtue of the fact that we are rationalizing beings who want to find some way of understanding the world around us, we ideologically try to justify it by saying that the owning class is good people, the working class, they're not so good people. And so what I think this fundamental dialectic does, when it takes hold and is part of the base of forming a society, is it makes us all go through life trying to place people in a good or bad person box, and we just see things as it's the good people and the bad people. And as long as we keep the bad people out of our lives, and as long as we keep the bad people in jail, and as long as we throw the bad people in asylums and mental hospitals, and as long as we rehabilitate the bad people to be productive members of society again, etc., etc., and as long as we praise the good people and make sure the good people are doing okay, and so on and so on, then things will just be, that's the just way of things. You just gotta find the people. You just gotta find everybody and sort them into one of the two binary categories of good person or bad person. I think literally the reason why people think in these terms of good and bad people is because we live in a society that still has the fundamental contradiction of the master-slave dialectic built into it materially, on a real material level. Because that is where our ideological thought level flows out of, is the material organization of and arrangement of society. So that's my perspective on that. I think the reason why people, especially, it doesn't matter your politics. It literally does not matter your politics, because liberals are just like this too, and it becomes adjusted to identity disparities. So it's like, oh, are you a racist? Ooh, do you need to check your privilege? Oh, are you a privileged person or are you an oppressed person? Are you an oppressed person or an oppressor? You know, they draw that binary distinction as well. What is that really? It's good person and bad person. And it sucks because all of that, it's funny because that sounds like something that Jordan Peterson would say. It sounds like something that he said. But honestly, it's not my fault that the liberals are acting like Jordan Peterson's caricature of me. It's not my fault. It's not my fault that the liberals are acting like Jordan Peterson's caricature of a leftist. Jordan Peterson just did the typical quasi-fascist move of lumping in liberals and leftists as the same shit. Postmodern neo-Marxism. It's funny though, because I'm like a postmodern neo-Marxist, but unironically, like, and it's based. But yeah, we just need to get over this. Like, I literally do think that's it. I think the reason why people are so moralistic like that is basically just boils down to the capitalist dialectic of bourgeoisie and proletariat, the master-slave dialectic. It's not just it existed before capitalism, obviously, but in the form it takes in capitalism now it's very vicious. And I can feel people sort of asking me like, okay, but what if the old Marxist idea of classes and class society is like somehow outdated or doesn't really apply to our conditions today? And I would just tell you that it definitely fucking does, because like, if you have to work for a living, you're a proletarian. I'm sorry, like, you are. And there are so many Americans who literally live paycheck to paycheck. Tell me that's not proletarianism. Tell me they haven't been proletarianized. Try to tell me that. You can. Also, try to tell me that the white proletariat is a fucking myth. Try. I dare you. Because that's one of the most annoying fucking bullshit points.